Hey guys, what's up? It's Brooklyn Dre. Every summer, USPS carriers are dying and collapsing from heat related issues. Today, Brian Renfro delivered a powerful message to OSHA. I think that he did a great job, and I'm hoping that this leads to more protection for carriers so that we don't have to keep losing lives every summer. Please like, comment, and subscribe.
Speaker is Brian Renfro. Please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Brian Renfro. I'm the president of the National Association of Letter Carriers. Good afternoon, everyone. As president of the National Association of Letter Carriers, I represent over 200,000 active city letter carriers employed by the United States Postal Service who deliver our nation's mail. We work in every city and town in all 50 states and the U.S. territories of Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, including areas that experience long seasons of stifling heat and humidity. Our members are deeply familiar with the risks that working outside in the elements can pose. Our jobs are physical, strenuous, which makes letter carriers among the workers most at risk of heat injury and illness. Many hundreds of letter carriers get sick from the heat each year, and tragically, some have lost their lives. I appear before you today to express my union's strong support for OSHA's heat injury and illness prevention in outdoor and indoor work settings proposed rule. We believe this rule will be a critical protection for city letter carriers as well as millions of other workers whose work regularly exposes them to the hazards of excessive heat. This essential workplace safety measure, frankly, is long overdue, and we applaud OSHA's efforts to finally make it a reality. The heat poses a grave risk to my members. We deliver mail and packages all year long, including during the hottest weeks of the summer. Typically, we work at minimum 8 hours a day, though often much more, through the peak heat of the afternoon and almost entirely alone. An unmitigated exposure to the excessive heat, as we've seen over and over and over, causes heat stress, which often results in serious injury, illness, and unfortunately, even death. Some letter carriers, especially those in urban areas, walk their entire routes. They carry a heavy mail satchel or they push a cart full of mail all day long on city streets. And on hot days, they are fully exposed to the heat. Others use a postal vehicle. While the Postal Service for years now has been working on its promise to provide a fully air conditioned fleet of vehicles, most delivery vehicles today remain without air conditioning and they are poorly ventilated. When they sit in the sun on hot days, their interiors literally begin to bake, subjecting our members to excessive temperatures inside those vehicles. Most often, we park our vehicles at a designated park point, get out of the vehicle, and deliver mail by foot. We walk up and down the streets, carry packages on our arms, we carry heavy satchels, we walk up and down steps, we walk through yards, and on hot days, we can suffer the heat from both being outside in the elements as well as having to deal with the excessive heat without air conditioning inside our postal vehicles. I'm a letter carrier myself from Mississippi, so I know this danger very well. When I first started this job, I had to learn the warning signs of heat illness and how to hydrate throughout the day. But the fact is, it should not only be up to me, in my case, and other workers to protect themselves. In the case of our members, the Postal Service's lack of adequate protection leads to heat related sicknesses and injuries all the time. Postal Service records show that letter carriers report hundreds of heat injuries annually. However, the actual number, there's no question that it's greater, as the Postal Service's productivity focused culture discourages letter carriers from reporting symptoms, discourages their supervisors from further reporting issues that are reporting to them. As in some cases, we've even seen letter carriers be disciplined by overzealous managers just because they suffered a heat related injury. OSHA data on severe injuries indicates that letter carriers suffer from heat disorders at an excessive rate. Nature of the work we do pushes it to the top of the charts of companies that have the highest number of severe heat-related injuries, a category, as you all know, that includes at least one night of hospitalization. And sometimes these injuries can compound. For example, in July 2021, a letter carrier in Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania, suffered acute kidney damage after delivering mail in high temperatures and was hospitalized for 2 days. The first injury made him more susceptible to another, and about a month and a half later, the carrier was again working in the heat and experienced severe heat cramps, dizziness, fatigue, and vomiting. He repeatedly notified his supervisor over the course of about 3 hours, and the supervisor eventually provided some assistance with getting the mail delivered, but did not help the carrier get to the hospital. Instead, when the carrier clocked off and went to the hospital, he was admitted due to heat exhaustion, acute kidney failure, and atrial fibrillation. Heat illness does not just sicken the members that I represent. Unfortunately, on occasion, it kills them. In July 2012, John Watzlawick of Independence, Missouri, had just returned to work following a 6-week absence due to a medical condition and began delivering without an opportunity to acclimate to the heat at its worst. After he barely made it through his first day, but continuing because of pressure from management, he suffered again the next day and continued until he could not continue anymore. He collapsed on his route and he died the next day. Sadly, before John died, a number of letter carriers in Independence had to undergo treatment. Some were hospitalized because of the heat. But because there is no governing rule, the employer, the Postal Service, took no preventative action. At least 7 letter carriers have died as a result of exposure to excessive heat since 2012. And tragically, these injuries and deaths are completely preventable. So the Postal Service has a heat illness prevention program in place, but it is insufficient. It does not include the necessary elements that heat safety experts agree are critical to preventing serious illness, injury, and death. The Postal Service management has consistently resisted implementing more meaningful heat safety measures, which has left letter carriers unprotected. The Postal Service has demonstrated they are not willing to put any sort of preventative measures in place beyond what is required by OSHA. That is where the importance of adoption of this rule really lies. Over the last decade, my union has fought fiercely in a number of forums to protect letter carriers from the dangers of heat exposure. We participated in extensive OSHA litigation against the Postal Service, as well as engaged the Postal Service directly to first initiate the HIP program that we have, but to continue to try to make it a more robust program that will protect letter carriers. However, as I just mentioned, the Postal Service has repeatedly demonstrated it is not going to go further than what OSHA requires. In litigation that charged the Postal Service with multiple OSHA citations for exposing letter carriers to extreme heat, Postal Service witnesses said that hundreds of heat injuries suffered by letter carriers were quote, statistically meaningless, and that reported heat-related injuries were, quote, not a major concern. The Postal Service also consistently prioritizes non-interrupting delivery over letter carrier safety. Local managers that supervise the members I represent are pressured and even incentivized to ignore what few protections exist in their current HIP to try to achieve their productivity targets. Let me give you an example. In June 2016, a Des Moines, Iowa letter carrier texted her supervisor that she did not feel well. And the supervisor texted back, urging her to continue and to, quote, do the best you can. She was unable to complete her route. She returned to the post office, vomiting on the way. And when she arrived, her supervisor told her she needed to go back out and finish the route. The carrier was later diagnosed with heat exhaustion. And it's not just the union's opinion that the Postal Service prioritizes productivity over safety. In fact, several OSHA judges have noted the pressure that postal management puts on letter carriers. One remarked that carriers are, quote, under near constant pressure to complete their routes faster and to discourage them from taking breaks, reporting injuries or illness, or calling in sick. Another observed that the message given to letter carriers by postal management, quote, was clear: heat is not an excuse for performance issues. So given management's prioritization of not interrupting delivery, even in the case of safety issues, many letter carriers fear retaliation if they do what they need to do, such as take an additional break to mitigate the possible damage of excessive heat. The Postal Service's own medical expert testified in an OSHA case against the agency that, quote, when workers either report symptoms or said they wanted extra breaks, they were either disciplined or their supervisor became angry. It's clear, once again, the Postal Service will never implement or uphold adequate protections on its own. And current legal protections are grossly inadequate and they do not protect workers. While the federal OSHA statute has a general duty clause that applies nationwide and requires employers to provide workplaces free from recognizable hazards that are likely to cause death or physical harm, it has not been an effective tool for protecting workers from the hazard of excessive heat across a variety of cases. A nationwide heat standard that sets clear requirements for the Postal Service and other employers is the only way to truly mitigate the danger that heat poses. A handful of states have enacted their own standards, but these set differing levels of protection and leave the rest of the country without any protection. Overall, my union believes that OSHA did an exceptional job designing an effective heat safety standard. We urge OSHA to implement its proposed heat rule in full and offer 2 minor suggestions to further protect workers. I'd like to highlight 3 sections that are of critical importance and must not be scaled back. Lives depend on the full implementation of these sections. First is the critical importance of the no cost to employees principle in Section J and paid breaks in Section E3. NALC has always insisted that the Postal Service pay for the additional breaks that letter carriers take to stay safe, but the agency has refused. Carriers should not have to bear the cost of need or rest breaks any more than a worker in a factory should have to pay for an air ventilation system to keep them safe. Moreover, unless additional breaks are paid, carriers will be reluctant to take them, heightening the risk of heat illness and injury. This was precisely the case with Eugene Gates, a letter carrier in Dallas, Texas, who collapsed and died in a customer's front yard on a sweltering afternoon when the heat index reached 110 degrees in June 2022. Just 1 month before his death, Brother Gates received a formal letter of warning from his supervisor for, quote, stationary time. He was resting from the extreme heat. This letter reprimanded Brother Gates for taking too long to deliver his route, including for stopping several times on his way back to his post office. We strongly support the requirement that employers bear the full cost of the implementation of heat safety measures and that employers allow and encourage employees to take rest breaks and that these breaks be paid. Second is the critical importance of a gradual acclimatization protocol. As OSHA's discussion of the medical evidence in the proposed rule makes clear, proper acclimatization protocols are vital to mitigating the risk of working in the heat. We know this from bitter, tragic experiences. The Postal Service's HIP does not include acclimatization provisions. Nearly all of the heat-related letter carrier deaths have happened to carriers who were returning to work after a period of absence or being new to the job. For example, in July 2018, Peggy Frank of Woodland Hills, California, died of hyperthermia inside her unair-conditioned mail truck during a heat wave. She had recently completed a 3-month medical absence and returned immediately to carrying her normal route on a day when the temperature outside hit 117 degrees. Sister Frank had not been given an opportunity to acclimate to the heat. Only a month earlier, a brand new letter carrier from Lexington, Kentucky, Daniel Rosenbach, had died of a heart attack, later proven to be triggered by extreme heat on his first day delivering a route by himself. He also had no chance to acclimate to the heat. While OSHA's proposed standard allows employers a choice when implementing acclimatization measures for newer returning employees, we urge OSHA to adopt only the first option, the gradual exposure protocol, as the default protocol. We suggest that OSHA amend Section E7 to require acclimatization through gradual exposure unless the employer can show that the option would not be practical. Because gradual exposure likely poses more logistical challenges for employers, we believe that if they are given the freedom to choose, most employers will opt for the other, the easier but less protective option. As noted in the proposed standard, when it comes to new employees, gradual exposure is the recommendation of the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. Third is the critical importance of preserving employees' rights to collectively bargain over heat safety provisions. Our union applauds OSHA for promoting employee participation in the formulation of employer heat safety plans. The workers know best how to keep their workplaces safe. Promoting the otherwise unheard voices of workers is also particularly important at non-union employers. However, NALC is concerned that unionized employers could misconstrue Section C6 as authorizing them to disregard their responsibility to address workplace safety and collective bargaining as mandated by the National Labor Relations Act. We suggest OSHA amend that section to clarify that nothing in the proposed rule is intended to relieve an employer of its obligation under any applicable collective bargaining law or collective bargaining agreement. Our concern
Mr.
about the
Renfro,
risk.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, your time has expired. Thank you for being with us today. Let me ask the panel. Mr. Shayer, do you have any questions for the witness?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Renfro, for testifying, and I'd like to turn it to Rachel Kars from OSHA for first set of questions.
Hi, I have a few questions. The first one, in your written comments, you mentioned that an increase in mail sorting automation has increased the portion of the workday that the letter carriers are spending outdoors. Has your organization looked into any correlation with the increased time outdoors and an increase in heat-related illness or injury? And if so, can you provide any evidence of that?
Sure, we would. I believe the statistics that we have actually come from OSHA. We'd certainly be happy to provide those post-hearing. Generally speaking, the balance of work that letter carriers do preparing, sorting mail in the morning in a climate-controlled environment, and then the portion of the work they do actually out delivering mail has continuously over a period now of really 35 or so years shifted to a smaller portion in a climate controlled environment, in most cases an hour at the most, to the vast majority of that approaching about 7 hours a day being in the heat. Over time, there have been an increase in the number of heat injuries. I think it's a very reasonable conclusion to draw that that is part of the reason why. I think it's also reasonable to the fact that it's simply hotter. I mean, that's a scientific fact. So our exposure to the heat has increased over the years based on the fact that we are out in the elements longer. And that is a trend that we have seen. As I said, it began with automation really in the early 1990s, and it continues to this day, year after year after year.
My next question, are you able to provide, for the record and post-hearing comments, Dr. Bernard's unpublished analysis or report? That would be something we'd be interested in seeing. I believe that was referenced in your submitted comments.
It was. That is, as you probably are aware, has been a significant part of the OSHA litigation that I mentioned over the years, and we would easily be able to provide that, yes.
Okay. So these questions are, the next ones are a little bit, I'm not sure how much you'll be able to help us, but or answer them. But in their submitted comments, USPS talked about the different provisions that they have in their HIP. Are there any of the measures that, such as training, emergency procedures, provision of water, uniform options, stand-up talks, posters, videos, postal bulletins, screensavers, laminated cars, stickers in vehicles, home mailings, and daily messaging reminders that your members find to be the most effective in their experience? If that's something you want to address in a post-hearing comment, that's fine as well too.
No, I can answer that now. I don't think there's any of the measures that are in the existing HIP, of which our union was very heavily, I was personally very involved in the creation of. I don't think we could say that one particular element of it is more important and has proven to be more effective than the other. I think when you look at the proposed rule here, which is of course more comprehensive than their HIP, that the idea is they are all, in one case of an individual circumstance, I suppose one element may be more important than the other. In a different circumstance, a different element may be more important. But generally, it would be very difficult for me to draw a conclusion as to which elements might be, to prioritize them, so to speak. I think it's very fact specific.
Okay. Or I'm not sure if you're familiar with a cost analysis performed by USPS in November 2024. If you are, we'd be interested in your thoughts on that analysis. It's something they referenced in their submitted comment, but if not, that's okay too. That might be something.
So Post Service does a lot of cost analysis as a very large organization. I will, so I'm not sure exactly which specific one you might be referring to. We would be more than happy to review it and comment on it in, post hearing if that's something that you'd be interested in.
And typically, where do letter carriers take breaks? Are they taking them in the truck, going to a break area?
That is one of the challenges we face in mitigating the hazards of excessive heat. Letter carriers have, as a standard, 2 breaks a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. The one in the afternoon is always taken while they are out delivering mail, doing their street work. The break in the morning, in most cases, is taken while they're out doing their street work. In some cases, it's taken before they leave the office, the post office in the morning. We do have forms where they designate their break locations. Part of the existing HIP and the discussion, going back years surrounding it is, obviously identifying locations where they could take breaks in climate controlled locations where available. We encourage that and have made an effort to do that. But the fact is, there are almost 150,000 postal routes that my members carry. Every one of them is different. Some of them have a plethora of, places where that are climate controlled. Others have literally zero. So it really all just depends. Of course, we are very, supportive and been very involved now for over 10 years in the project of the Postal Service acquiring new delivery vehicles, and those vehicles being air conditioned would go a long way towards having a climate control break location.
Okay. And I have one last question. They noted that in the HIP, it includes the provision of water. How do letter carriers typically have access to this water? Is it like coolers in the truck?
Yeah, most use they have some sort of cooler that they use. Usually it's a large sort of thermos type, at least for most. We do require in post offices, of course, they have water that they can have before they leave in the morning. That said, I can speak from personal experience, regardless of how big that container is. On a hot day, you're going to fill it up many times throughout the day. So similarly to identifying break locations, it can be a challenge to identify locations to refill water. So that's one of the pieces that we have to deal with each different circumstance on each route too.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I'd now like to turn to Patty Downs.
Thank you. Patty Downs with the Directorate of Standards and Guidance. Just kind of piggybacking on Rachel's questions, you mentioned that most delivery vehicles are not equipped with air conditioning. I'm wondering what procedures are in place for cooling mail carriers who work from their vehicles along the route?
there are zero procedures for cooling inside vehicles that do not have air conditioners. They are fitted with, I guess, what is about a 6 to 8 inch fan that's mounted on the dash that blows hot air, but really doesn't do anything to cool the vehicle. So in the old fleet of customized vehicles, the ones that you've seen for 25 or 30 years that we are in the process of replacing, there is no measured vehicles.
Okay. Are there any limitations on when fans in those vehicles can be used or when they should be used? Any guidance on that?
No, when it's hot, I can assure you the fan stays on all the time. A fan, even blowing hot air in your face, is better than no fan when you are in a vehicle that is, excessively hot all day long. I can speak from firsthand experience about that.
Okay. What about for those who deliver mail on foot? You mentioned some of the urban settings where they're carrying it. What controls are in place for cooling those employees?
Of course, they're not dealing with a vehicle. For the most part, it is in highly dense populated urban areas where we have those types of routes, and typically it is much easier to locate climate controlled places, building lobbies, businesses, things like that, where they can take breaks. So I think, again, there's exceptions to this because there's so many. There's almost 150,000 routes, as I said, but typically it's going to be in some climate control location they have access to along their route.
Okay. And Patty Downs again, my last question is, what controls are you aware of, if any, that have been tried and did not work? And why didn't they work?
I am not aware of any, certainly not at the national level of the Postal Service, as part of the HIP that have been tried and have not worked. Everything that was put in place with their existing HIP, which dates back to 2018, 2019, there has not been anything removed because it did not work. We just need more.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Renfro, and Your Honor, that completes OSHA's questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Naughton, do you have anything from the solicitor's office?
Yes, Mr. Renfro. We were curious when your members might be feeling experiencing heat symptoms. How are they able to, or are they able to access any kind of assistance in the way of first aid? Does the USPS have any kind of policy or procedures for providing those services while they're on their routes?
So in the HIP itself, in the educational materials that we provide, what we advise them to do is that if they are experiencing some sort of physical impact, so to speak, to take no chances, that they should call 911 first, and that they should also notify their managers, and we try to educate them on what the warning signs are, in which I'm sure you have the HIP. You'll see there's a number of different educational pieces there, but we encourage them to take no chances and seek medical attention if they begin to feel something that's out of the ordinary.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Renfro.
Sure.
All right. Do we have participant questions?
Yes, the first one is from Ms. Kane.
Thank you. I have two questions. Hi, President Renfro. My name is Chris Kane. I'm with North America's Building Trades Unions. And one of the questions I have for you is if you could explain what is included in the Postal Service's HIP and why is that not sufficient in your view?
Sure. So the general pieces that are included, There is an oversight component that lays out a structure of how it would be administered. There is a training component that covers the information that would be distributed to both employers and managers. It goes into some detail about that. Part of the training is a messaging piece using the device that you all see letter carriers carry around all the time. And that is essentially, then there's a few other things as far as requirements for, having water and things like that, and administrative controls, that type stuff. What it is missing that are very, very important pieces here, as I referred to in my testimony, number one is an acclimatization protocol, and number two, establishing a work rest regimen that employees that were working, once the temperature, the heat index reaches a certain threshold, would have the opportunity to take breaks that were beyond their normal breaks that were necessary to mitigate the impact of excessive heat. Those are the two things that are completely absent from the existing HIP.
Thank you. And so, given that, and what do you think the experience of letter carriers will be if the proposed rule is thrown out or drastically altered?
I think there's a couple of impacts. First, unfortunately, the stories, some of which I referenced in my testimony, about individuals that, lost their lives, where measures like this could have prevented those deaths. Unfortunately, we will continue to see those happen. That's one thing. Secondly, I think the continued absence of a rule, or this rule not being adopted after, for well over a decade, us now fighting to simply protect our members from getting sick and dying, I think in some ways would potentially embolden some of the issues that I mentioned culturally within the Postal Service and their management culture, that it would what we've seen is problematic in terms of responding to employees. They're kind of the, let's call it, productivity goals that have been prioritized over employee safety. I think the withdrawal or this rule not being adopted, having gone through the process, in many ways could throw a little fuel on that fire, which would be, I think, really potentially devastating as we continue to see this hazard grow year after year.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. And do we have any other participants?
Yes, Your Honor. The last question is from Ms. Arbery.
Hi, Your Honor. Shanae Arbery with the AFL-CIO. President Renfro, thank you for your testimony. I'm just wondering why USPS has refused to implement guidelines that will fully protect letter carriers. And then I have a second question after.
Sure. Answer to the first question is very simple. They will, the Postal Service will do what the law, what the Department of Labor and what OSHA requires them to do, and nothing more. And that is I think underscores the importance of this rule for the hundreds of thousands of people that work at the Postal Service, more than anything else.
I'm Shanae Arbery with AFL-CIO again. President Renfro, secondly, can you describe a typical delivery route and the risk of posed by heat for letter carriers?
Sure. No, good question. Letter carriers normally will, report to work. They normally work inside preparing mail, sorting mail, getting ready for delivery in a climate-controlled environment for around an hour. Some might be a little less, some may be a little more. And then they go out on the street, sometimes on foot, as I mentioned. Sometimes they're in a vehicle, the vast majority of which today do not have air conditioning. And they are out making deliveries for, at minimum, 7 hours. And in many cases, longer than that. In many cases, working 10 up to 12 hours per day. And it is a job that moves very quickly. You know, we often see our letter carrier and they smile and say hello. And, you know, it's hard to sometimes even just think about they are doing that hundreds of times every single day. They never stop moving, with the exception of you know, the breaks and with a 30-minute lunch break. But it's a very sort of busy job that's continuous, often results in carrying weight, and you know, it results in extended exposure to the elements, whatever they may be. In this case, we're talking about heat, without the opportunity to currently without the opportunity to take breaks or get out of the heat, get out of the cold, whatever, you know, the challenge of the day may be. And once they finish delivering all their mail, they go back, you know, to their office for a few minutes and come back and do it again the next day.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Arbery. Anything further from the OSHA panel?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
From the solicitor's office?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, thank you. Then let's hear our next witness. Mr. Renfro, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, that is our final witness for today.
Oh, I must be looking at an old schedule.
Yes, it looks like those last two are rescheduled for another session.
Another one on the schedule. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our scheduled hearing today. I appreciate everyone's participation in this hearing. I feel like I've learned a lot that I didn't know. It's been interesting to be here today. I know that earlier, Ms. Kane made a suggestion about extending the post-hearing comment period. That's not up to me to decide. So I won't make any comment on that one way or the other than to say that if OSHA adopts that suggestion, I'm sure they'll let you know. As of right now, the post-hearing comment period ends on September 30th. So please plan on having your post-hearing comments in by then. Thank you to everyone for your interest in this rule. And we are adjourned, I think, to reconvene on Friday, aren't we? Friday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time?
Correct.
Okay, very good. I wish everyone a pleasant evening. Thank you for being here today. We are adjourned and off the record.
Thank you.
Thank you.